this is Eunice Lee, and I am now recording my Fall 2017 quarterly plan video for collective narrative. So, to recap, last quarter, so in the spring, I did a lot of background research and need finding to identify some principles that promote connection in a collective narrative and just understanding what a collective narrative even means. And so, two takeaways that I designed arguments for and tested were synchronicity and spatial proximity. So, synchronicity, the argument that, like, if someone starts snapping their fingers, you also naturally just follow along just because you want to be in the same beat. And that leads to a greater, feeling of, connection, like you guys are, one person. Spatial proximity is based on this research that, if you eat chocolate with someone next to you versus if they're, in another room, you enjoy the experience more because you're sharing it with someone. And that was really great insight in looking at, how do you make people, even looking at their screens, feel like they're sharing an experience with someone as though that person is right next to them. So the way I tested that was doing creating a cognitive walkthrough of an experience called Night Walk, which is an experience that is situational and opportunistic in that people are pinged if they are, for example, leaving a library at a certain time and walking home alone at night. And the idea is for these users to see, all walk to the same beat, hence synchronicity, and see themselves moving closer and closer to their homes. And that was a good first test. It led to some great insights, but also unsatisfactory results. I was trying to test things like social mental spaces, in that a sociologist named Mary Chico has done a lot of research on how people connect on the internet and through chat boxes. And I tried to get people in this walkthrough to talk to the other folks that they were walking with, but that seemed to really be a big turnoff or kind of scary. And so things like safety became an issue. And I think that's totally valid and something that I didn't really realize until this happened. So those were really great insights that I walked away from. So kind of at this point, I need to develop another sort of way to test synchronicity and spatial proximity and sort of refine those design arguments, which leads me, I guess, to my project goals, in that sort of the way I see collective narrative in the grand scheme of the breaking boundaries sake is that if Jenny and Allison are figuring out ways to make these scenes, all these experiences in my head are scenes, and Ryan is finding a way to work with the affordances and to recruit people, and then Jenny and Allison are working with these content experiment creators, then I, in the end, am this director trying to figure out how do we get everything, all these scenes, matched together and have people participating but also reacting into this grand collective narrative. So you can think of me as a conductor of a symphony or the director, and that's what makes my project New Knowledge, is the situational and opportunistic aspects of creating narratives. And that's something that current technology does not take advantage of. So my goal for this quarter is to sort of come out with a set of principles that make for a good script and a collective narrative. And it's similar to, I think, what the habit sourcing paper did, in that I'm creating these design arguments for principles, whether it's situational or opportunistic, testing those out, and then basically I could, once I identify these and make arguments for them and make a claim, researchers could look at this and be like, okay, like that's a way connection that like we haven't seen before and we can apply to our research. And then for end users, I guess, what would this? I guess for end users, they would also get to see like what what makes a good collective narrative. So I guess similar to researchers. My design goals are to use Polaris more in the formation of my arguments. I think it's a really great tool, and the checkboxes make it really helpful to see what your arguments are lacking in and how they're strong. And then a big tech goal of mine is to actually start testing some of my arguments using Jenny and Allison's code. I didn't really touch it last quarter, and so this year I really want to use their code more and sort of help become more familiar with it so that as I build my own tech architecture, I understand like how these scenes are being built. And then another design goal is to use Meg and Alex's McGonagall prototype because I think there will be a lot of instances when I won't have time to like write all the code and I just want to like test the idea or test the interaction in a very lo-fi way. So yeah, that is so like what might be the tech architecture to facilitate building a good script in the context of CN. I think that's pretty much it. I think this is a big idea. It's important as I create these principles to understand why it worked, like why people felt connected and like why people could tell stories in new ways. And yeah. Sort of a big struggle that has happened in the past and continues to happen are ways to concrete ways to measure connection. I think that's just something that I'll have to continuously like through trial and error figure out and just get a lot of feedback on. So if you're wondering how you can help, keep asking me this question and make me answer it so I have better plans when I'm testing and creating arguments. So yeah, that is it. Thank you for listening.